In Hungarian art history, Anna Zador was one of the greatest figures in her field. She was born in 1904 and died in 1995. During this time she created a great many paintings and founded her own style of art, which had the influence of what would become later known as neoclassicism. Ms. Zador also worked extensively in the design of landscapes. This figure utilized many historical documents, both to document the history of gardens and art histories, and make innovations within it. Although there were several attempts at creating a full history of Hungarian gardening, the work by Ms. Zador was the most complete of these documents. Much of the work was in fact based on previous writers in the 17th to 20th century. A chief influence on her work was the archivist and one of her professors, Antel Heckler. Her first known landscape paper was a review of the book by A.E. Brinkman, Jean Garten. Her earliest publications mostly consisted of book reviews from various historical and contemporary documents and manuscripts regarding horticultural history. In her review of A.E. Brinkman's work, she also laid out the basic history of European garden landscaping and how it developed within the history of Hungary. Within this document was also a discussion of the aesthetics within horticulture. She was the first to do so amongst all Hungarian writers on the history of Hungarian gardening. Within this framework, she discussed how the base environment and local architecture affected how the methods of landscape design developed to make use of these constraints and opportunities most effectively. The second book review she created was a review of how an issue made by the Studio, a Hungarian magazine from that time period. This issue was dedicated to the history of Japanese gardening, and she corrected errors that were found within this document. The first paper that was made by Anna Zador, that was not a book review, was a scientific paper that covered the history of Japanese gardening versus English gardens, and the corresponding aesthetics surrounding both. This was unofficial, however. The first official one happened in 1931, and it was a product of 5 years of reading and analyzing Baroque garden plans of the Glassowicz archives. This was used to create a paper covering the aesthetics of such gardens. She would over time begin to view Baroque as a dead end and pursue aesthetics of the neoclassical movement. The garden plans of the Glassowicz, however, did influence her movement into the history of Hungarian garden history. In her first paper on the neoclassical movement and garden design, she evaluated and classified all the gardens through the work of Leopoldo Pollack. Mr. Pollack obtained the garden plans for a Villa Belgiojoso created in 1790 to 1793. This garden plan was first made in Milan, but the Hungarian artist Leopoldo Pollack adapted this design to create his garden. Her research then took another turn where she discussed and documented the full history of how primordial form of the Hungarian garden emerged between 1770 to 1780 as it got codified into its present form in the early 19th century, between 1800 and 1830. This time period represented a movement from the French-style gardens, which were by nature very rigid, akin to hedge mazes, to a style more akin to English-style gardens of modern era. This was the first known fully written history of the Hungarian garden during this era. After World War II, she published only one more work in this field, a paper on a sentimental garden found in Hodvák, Slovakia. She did not do any works on contemporary gardens or gardens prior to the ages 1770 to 1830. The post-World War II era also changed her writing style and the subjects of her work, changing from garden history to architecture history, and changing from being very romantic in her language to very strict and scientific. Her last work on the subject of horticulture involved the use of paintings of similar landscapes, and through these paintings she was able to understand the intellectual genealogy and heritage of the garden through both the owner's original plan and what sources may influence that work. For Anna Zador, the last half of her life was dedicated to preserving historic gardens, publishing articles, and reviewing books. She also influenced and mentored a descendant of the Pollack family, Mihaly Pollack. Although his figure was considered only mediocre as a garden designer despite his many works. Her work on Hungarian gardening continued for remaining days, and her works continue to be cited within Hungary for quite some time after her death. Her last job was the founding of the subgroup within the ICOMOS called the Hungarian National Committee on Historical Gardens. She was elected president of this group in 1985 and served 2 terms before retiring from public life. In the end, however, all that draw breath will die in time, and so she passed away in 1995. But her legacy remained unbroken. Even in modern times, Hungarian schools of art history still have a garden history subject within such courses. And that will covers everything. Thank you for watching. Thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. If you really enjoyed it and think you can donate, you can do so at Buy Me a Coffee, link in the description below. Thank you for watching.